Uh, Good afternoon. Tim O'Connell. I'm Chair of the Utility Board, calling this unfortunately delayed meeting to order. Um, Pursuant to notice, we are doing this by Zoom at our regularly scheduled, well, other than being a few minutes late, regularly scheduled date and time. Um, So who's from the city who can call the roll?
Chair O'Connell,
I'm present.
Vice Chair Quantz, Board Member Majewski,
Present.
Board Member Marshall,
Present.
Board Member Lair,
Present.
Board Member Milton. Thank you.
We have four members of the board, and that is a quorum. And also recognize Councilmember Jacobson. Welcome, sir. Let's get to it. Approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'll take a motion from one of the board members who was.
I was there and I'll move to approve the minutes from the last meeting. I guess the meeting of February 13th, 2024.
Second?
I'll second that as well.
Second by Member Majewski. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Move on to you know what? I skipped inadvertently, folks. I'm sorry. I'm so rattled by being late. Were there any public appearances at the board?
There are no public appearances this
No
evening.
public appearances. Sorry for the going out of order there. All right, back to the regular item of business number 2, our stormwater operations and permit update. Mr. Kettner.
I will actually ask Brian Harvickson, our right-of-way and stormwater manager, to join us, as well as Decca Robles, our stormwater quality technician, who are here this evening to present the overview of our stormwater and PDS program. So with that, Brian and Decca, it's yours.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Brian Hardvickson, the right-of-way and stormwater manager. And as Jason mentioned, I'm joined by Decca Roble. She's our stormwater quality technician. I'm going to conduct the first part of the presentation, which is more about maintenance and operations. And then Decca is going to follow with the NPDS information. So let's start the slides. Decca. Okay. Go to slide 2. All right, our general outline this evening. We're going to go over the stormwater utility, what it is, what it's about, and cover some maintenance and operations. Then we're going to transition to the NPDS permit. And then finally, we're going to go over some next steps. Switch slides. So the stormwater utility, it's a system designed to carry surface water from rain events safely and efficiently into receiving water. And since we're an island in the middle of Lake Washington, that receiving water is Lake Washington. So all of our conveyance eventually ends up in Lake Washington. Along the way, we have catch basins and retention ponds, and these structures help remove some of the larger debris and sediment as well as the surface water flows downstream. But other than that, the stormwater is not treated. So if you have pollutants such as car wash detergent or oil drips from cars, or even dissolved metals from like brake dust, that eventually flows into the lake. We definitely tried to mitigate that and address that issue by having our proactive stormwater quality inspections. We also have a quick spill response set up with our staff operations. Slide change. So these are some of our numbers of our system. It's a pretty extensive system for a fairly small island. We have 357 outfalls into Lake Washington, 5,548 catch basins, 83 miles of piped storm conveyance, 13 miles of open ditches, and 9 miles of open water courses. Next. So one of our operations is system cleaning. Our storm pipes, they're routinely jet cleaned, and this is to remove roots or other blockages to keep them free flowing. We have Vector service that addresses the catch basin sumps that collects the sediment. So we remove that sediment into the vehicle, and then that sediment that's removed goes to our shop where we have a decant facility. And that water and sediment mix is decanted onto the pad where the liquids are discharged into the sewer system for some additional treatment by King County. And then the solids are dried under a covered area. Later on, our staff take those dried solids and dispose of them at a regulated facility. On a quarterly basis, King County requires us to do a report on the liquid content of what we're discharging. They're mainly looking for heavy metals concentrations and the settleable solids. So we have some photos below that kind of dictate this process. On the left, we have a Vector that's working on a retention pond, cleaning out the sediment. In the middle photo, we have our decant facility where that Vector is dumping the water and sediment mix where it's separated. And then on the right, we have DECA taking water quality samples for the quarterly report. Next slide. One of our key operations is doing some camera inspections of the pipes to see what condition they're in and see if we have blockages. The pictures below, this is our staff member and our in-house equipment. To the right, you can see the screen, what the camera picks up. That's root intrusion within the pipe. He's also doing some repairs with some jet set around the catch basin that were needed. So this is a combination of in-house and contracted work. This is coordinated with our jet cleaning process. Typically, we run into issues like this where there's root intrusion. So you need to actually have the jetter handy to clean the pipe so you can do a full camera inspection and actually see the condition of the pipe. We also do targeted inspections in advance of all the capital roadway overlays. So we can repair any issues that we observe before we overlay the roads. We don't have to excavate a newly paved road to make repairs. So also any of the defects that we find, some of the smaller ones, staff make repairs, but significant ones are loaded into our capital improvement projects. Next slide. Some of our maintenance and operations here. We do address minor repairs in the pipes. This is an example of one on 44th. We had a sinkhole that emerged, so the team excavated and then uncovered a collapsed concrete storm pipe from the 60s. And we replaced that with some resilient ADS pipe on the right-hand side, backfilled and repaved. The larger repairs, such as pipe slip lining or large segments of pipe replacements, those are funded from the capital improvement division. Pipes are always replaced with the best material we can find with a life expectancy of greater than 50 years. Some other common repairs and replacements. We have a catch basin on the bottom right, where we had bricks as a riser on the top of an old catch basin. This was from the 50s. The bricks deteriorated, caused another sinkhole. We excavated, removed the bricks, replaced it with a cast concrete cover, so it has much more resiliency and conformity. And then on the left, we have an example of a ditch where we armored the system with specific rocks that are set up to capture sediment and also reduce erosion. So everything's brought up to current standards when we do these procedures. Next slide. One of our common response efforts from staff is for illicit discharge events. Really, an illicit discharge is anything other than rain that's entering our stormwater conveyance system. So typically it's oil drips. It can be from construction sites where there might be sediment running off from exposed soil. There could be equipment failures like from garbage trucks. They might have some hydraulic lines that burst and spill onto the roadway. So once it's observed or reported, we have a quick response effort where we get out and try to prevent any of that spill from reaching our conveyance system and moving its way downstream. Here on the left, we have an issue where we had a oil spill. We don't know what the source was. It was just a vehicle that was spilling oil as it was driving around. So we had to go to several locations. But we use a product that helps break up the oil, and then we follow up with the street sweeper. So this is a fairly significant staff component where last year we had 84 reported discharge events, and it does take time to do this field response. After we do the response, we report to Department of Ecology as to the results, and this is all required under the NPDES, which you'll hear about later. Next slide. Here is the street sweeper, which is important in that previous situation. So we have a routine sweeping frequency, and it's based on arterial, residential, or town center zones. And year to date, we've done 51 miles of arterials, 16 miles of residential, and 11 miles of town center. We do the town center the most frequent. It's the most used visible site where you have a lot of metals and brake dust from frequent braking. We have a lot of catch basins that collect leaves, and it's fairly flat topography wise. So frequent sweeping helps keep our system free of debris, and it hopefully reduces the amount of pollution entering the catch basin sumps and downstream. Next slide. Well, as we know, we've had some climate change. So over the last 5 to 10 years, really noticeable in the last 5 years, we've had more of these very intense short duration rainfall events. And it's caused some challenges with our system where it tends to wash debris, vegetation debris, over some of the catch basin covers and the inlets. And that clogs the inlet, causes surface water to expand beyond where we would like it to, as in the top picture, that's at Wildwood Park. We have a staff member looking for a catch basin opening through all that flooded rain. That was in December, early December when this happened. So it can cause flooding, landslides, erosion, and damaged property. So as we do our repairs in-house and our capital improvement projects, we do upsize pipes whenever possible. The bottom right photo is a minor landslide that occurred near Clark Beach in early December. And we're going to stabilize that, regrade it, and revegetate this spring. So generally, for our maintenance and operations, a lot of our activities are outlined and required by the NPDES permit and Department of Ecology. So for that segment, Deca Roble is going to cover that.
Thank you, Brian. So the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System, also known as the NPDES, was created in 1972 by the Clean Water Act, enforced by the EPA to address point source pollutions that discharge into water bodies, and it is administered by the Department of Ecology. It consists of 8 components, as you can see on the screen. The current permit is from 2019 to 2024. Those 4 components that are in bold will be the ones we'll be going over in this meeting today. The first component is stormwater planning. So stormwater planning consists of monthly interdepartmental meetings with various departments within the city. So this includes GIS, utility engineers, CPD, and parks and natural resources. And so we focus on discussing new and ongoing stormwater programs and projects because stormwater spans over various areas. So it is important that we are coordinating our efforts. We also take this time to compile data that is required for the annual NPDS report to the Department of Ecology. Another component of the NPDS is public education and outreach. So the way we do public education is by hosting workshops around the island. Last year, I hosted the Girl Scouts, as you can see on the picture on the right, where I presented a watershed model it's just showcasing all the different sources of stormwater pollution. So it can be from farms, from agriculture, golf courses, and just visually showcase how that water and all that pollution ends up into a local water body. Another way we conduct public outreach and education is by hosting a booth at the annual summer celebration. And at the event, we usually have maps and resources and just a ton of information for residents. And so we answer any questions that they may have, any concerns that they may have around their private stormwater, as well as the public infrastructure when it comes to stormwater. We also participate in touch a truck events by displaying our sweeper truck, which has a stormwater messaging on it, which says roadways become waterways to Lake Washington, don't drip and drive, which educates the public on how important it is for car maintenance, because when leaks are not addressed, it can lead to pollution entering our system. Another form of public education and outreach is the behavior change campaign, which we recently concluded. So it was over a course of 2 years in which we had, which was in 2 phases. And so the point of the behavior change campaign was to educate the residents on the harmful bacteria from abandoned pet waste on stormwater. And so we chose 3 sites where we put flags next to piles of pet waste that was not scooped up. And we left the flags up for a week, and we had an educational sign indicating what those flags represented. And this program was a success. And the behavior program just addressed significant stormwater issues. Another component of the NPDS is the illicit discharge and elimination program, which Brian also mentioned earlier. We had 84 instances of illicit discharge events last year. So it's important to train our staff on how to respond to spills, because it just isn't just one person's job. Whoever sees a spill when they're out, it's important that they know how to respond to it. And so we do an annual training, either by video or in-person demonstration. And so we demonstrate mock spills and take tours of the spill kit area, just so that people are familiar with where to get supplies from. And also we have implemented a procedure where every city vehicle has a spill kit, so that there isn't any time wasted in terms of coming back to the shop to grab materials. Everything is already ready to go. And so this makes sure that we are efficient at responding to spills and reducing stormwater pollution. A new component of the NPDS is the source control program, which was recently implemented in 2023. And so the purpose of this program is to inspect businesses, because businesses can be a point source of pollution. So that can be anywhere from grease, from oils. For example, we had an instance of where a business was reported to where they were seen washing their greasy floor mats outside, right next to a catch basin. And so we are required to inspect businesses that have been reported, but we also have an inventory of 13 businesses we need to inspect at least. And so last year we inspected 13 businesses in 2023. And we also updated the city code for source control inspections and enforcement. And so this allows us to go into businesses and inspect, and making sure their standards are up to code. And if they're not, it could be a way of educating them and providing resources so that they can meet the best management practices to reduce stormwater pollution. The next steps. So the next steps are to implement the new 2024-2029 NPDS permit. It will go into effect August 1st of 2024. We will also enact a new behavior change campaign. This will be a dumpster lid campaign focused on making sure businesses are closing their dumpsters and making sure they're locked, because it can be a source of illegal dumping and stormwater pollution. We are also going to continue to evaluate technology and equipment options to enhance our stormwater inspections and repairs. And we will also continue to train our staff in the use of pipeline condition reading software. Any questions?
If I can unmute there. Yes, I'm sure there will be some questions. I'll open up. Any member of the board? Meredith, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah. So a couple of questions, and either of you can answer this when it makes sense. You know, on the Vector service that you described, Brian, I don't quite know how to ask this in an intelligent way, but maybe you can answer it better than I can ask it. Of all of the places that one might Vector, is there some, do you hit some percentage of them every year? Do you rotate through a you know, a set schedule?
It's a
I mean,
combination, yeah. So for our catch basins, we have over 5,000 catch basins.
Right.
One of the requirements is inspecting those every 2 years. So as we inspect them, we note if it needs sediment removed on the next cycle. So that's how we filter which catch basins need Vector service. Roughly a third to a half of those catch basins need Vector service. So that's how we dictate those. We also have response efforts. There could be some sediment sliding from a construction site or from heavy rains. There are times where there's sediment that's input into the system beyond the normal usage. So for those occasions, we do respond specially for those items, and we do sediment removal. But we also do all of our retention ponds, and that's an annual basis, sometimes twice a year. It depends on how much rainfall we get each year, and that dictates how much sediment is washed through some of the open space water courses, which ends up in the retention ponds. So on average, the retention ponds are every year.
How many retention ponds are? Sorry, how many retention ponds do we have roughly?
We have 13 key retention ponds.
Okay.
And then we also have some vaults that are less frequently filled, but nearly the same volume as retention ponds, but they're subsurface manufactured concrete structures. And those are Vectored as well. We also can use the Vector service for excavation. If we need to get to a buried pipe for repairs, we might hydro excavate instead of using a backhoe. We can do that for the open ditch inlets as well and outlets to make sure the ditches are clear. It's just sometimes a quicker alternative to using an excavator.
Mm-hmm.
So does that answer your question?
It does very well, thank you. Tim, I have another question, but if somebody else does,
Yeah,
I can.
let's rotate around, Meredith, and we'll come back to you. I've got a couple myself as well.
Yeah,
Just
go.
quick,
George?
quick follow-up.
Yeah.
You haven't Vectored the beaver, have you?
No, the beaver has relocated himself or itself. So now we just need to maintain on a routine basis that open water course.
Okay. George?
I was curious, I think, Brian, this is a question for you. The reporting to the Department of Ecology, do they have an enforcement and oversight rule here? Or is it just a part of the state law that you have to file reports with them? I'm kind of curious as to what their role is versus the cities.
Ecology does provide oversight. If we have violations, there are procedures in place where we need to respond. We haven't been levied any fines, but they're definitely involved. So If there's any component of the permit that we are deficient in, they note that and communicate with us, and we make every effort to make a quick response and get that on track. There's just a lot of moving parts, and there's continually evolving requirements in the permit. So,
But I'll add to that we every year we have a subsequent follow-up interview, call it an audit of some sorts, with one of their project managers at Ecology each and every year, who's reviewing our program and our reporting requirements each year. So there is quite a bit of involvement from Ecology in this permit as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
usually on the illicit discharge incidents, they will sometimes follow up, even though we have everything documented and we send the report, they just touch base with us and do kind of a walkthrough as to our response efforts. So most of the contact throughout the year is regarding illicit discharge response. And then the annual report in March is when we have our interview process to go over a more detailed approach.
And Brian, I'm going to go ahead and recognize myself and leap in because that was actually going to be, I have two questions. That was the first of them. 80, did I hear you right? 84 illicit discharge incidents last year?
Yes.
I'm doing just the math in my head and I could readily be wrong, but that works out to one every what, 4 or 5 days?
Yes.
When you say you were responding to illicit discharge incidents, I mean, is this a 24/7 emergency response, or are you just coming up after the fact and noting what went wrong? What is the response there?
We do have on-call staff, so we respond at any time, 7 days a week. Typically, it would be a Friday afternoon. It's when we get the illicit discharge reports. So we might have certain days where we have several, and sometimes we might make it a week or two without any reports. So they kind of come in waves. But it is a significant time impact. There are times where we just need to go out and ensure that the contractor that caused the illicit discharge cleaned it up properly. But even that might take an hour or two just for transportation and documentation.
Okay. And you're doing that all hours of the day and night?
Yes. Most reports are during business hours.
Sure.
But we do get some on the weekends, after hours.
Okay. All right, thank you. That is very helpful.
Yep.
I have another question, but we'll do another round before that. Meredith, you said you had another question.
It might have been answered. I was curious about the process of how getting the permit works. I mean, and it sounds like you make a report. Well, Ecology comes in and looks at the report and/or does some kind of audit. I mean, and this is, I thought it might be a question more for Dika, which is how does that process work of getting the permit?
Yeah, so in the beginning, so let's take, for example, this new permit that will be implemented this year. So in February, we had the city manager sign a notice of intent to implement the permit. And so she signed that at the beginning of the year. And so that means we can officially adopt it once that date is reached. And there's actually just like a timetable. It's like, since it's a 5-year cycle, every year there are certain measures we need to meet and there's certain deadlines, and we just abide by those. And during the annual report, we just answer the questions that are relevant. And every year the annual report is just different because of the requirements of that year. And so it's just year by year type of permit. And we are already aware of like what even we need to do in 2025 or 2027, just because the permit is just complete when it's implemented.
So is it almost like a 5-year plan, and that Ecology gives you and says you should be doing X, this year, this, and then they come in and make sure that you've operated according to that plan, essentially?
Yep, on an annual basis.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Unless anybody else. Brian, this was during your part of the presentation. You don't have to call up the slide, I'm sure. Well, I certainly remember it. The one where you were showing us the photo of the fellow using the CCV, the TV to scope out the stormwater pipe.
Mhm.
That looked to me to be two, at least in the context of the size of the pipe at issue, two pretty darn dramatically large roots.
Yes.
And maybe that's why you picked that picture, and I fully get it. But my question is, A, how do you get the roots out of there? Is that something that you can do remotely? And B, what does that do to the pipe to have an intrusion of that size in the pipe?
Well, we clean the roots out from using the jet service. So it's a water
And
jet with a.
the large jet is sufficient to cut something that large?
Yes, so it might take a while, depending on, if you have a large diameter roots or bigger pipes, it can take some time to work through them. If they're really a solid structure, almost like a stump, sometimes it might take a week to get through a segment of pipe. Depends on the pipe material of what kind of damage that process takes on the pipe. If it's a corrugated metal, that's the biggest challenge, because as you're doing that process, you're typically puncturing the metal pipe. So in that case, our next step would be to reline the pipe or slip line it, which we've done in-house, even at the city shop. When it's concrete or cast iron, we have had good success at even clearing significant root intrusion without damaging the pipe.
And is the integrity of the pipe
If the
compromised by the fact that it's gotten this root intrusion?
Well, it depends. So after the process of cleaning, the pipe is undamaged from the process most times. But the reason that there's root intrusion might be because there's separated joints or the pipe is deficient to begin with.
Right.
So after we get it cleared, where we can get the camera through the system, that's where we can determine if there's any defect in the pipe and go from there, put it on the repair list.
Okay.
But typically there's just some separation in the joints and roots just find a way. It doesn't have to be a significant defect for roots to enter the system. They find the water.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Questions
I'm
for
not
staff?
sure if you can see Councilmember Jacobson's hand.
Oh, I could not, but you're out in the corner there, Councilman Jacobson. I certainly recognize you. Welcome, sir. You're muted right now.
Yes, my question is, of the illicit discharges, how many of those are attributed to ecology?
We would have to circle back to get that number. We don't have them separated by the occurrence at this point. We have that data that we can get for you.
Okay, thank you. There is lots of anecdotal stuff on Nextdoor about, oh gee whiz, I saw this garbage truck leaving a trail, throwing fluid down my street, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know whether that, how much validity there is to those things. But we do have some recourse to ecology on that.
Yeah, and they have their own response team. So oftentimes we're just ensuring that they cleaned it up properly. They do a good job of reporting for the most part. So
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing none, wanted to say thank you for the presentation. Very informative, and it's always helpful to hear how things are going along with this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Nothing else for staff on that. That is, I think, our last item of regular business. Next item of other business, the director's report.
Good evening. A couple reminders this evening for the utility board. One is we are currently recruiting for our open positions on the utility board. You got information from the city clerk earlier this week. We have 2 positions. Thank you, Chair O'Connell. Please spread the word if you are so interested. We actually believe one of our board members is up for reappointment. So if that individual wants to be reappointed, please get your application in. But nevertheless, please spread the word. And the utility board is an important group for our operations and our capital program and as the important work that we do here. So please take that time, and if there's questions, have them circle back with me or our city clerk's office. The
And
second piece is
whose
just,
term is up?
I believe it's Mr. Majewski's term is up.
Okay.
Second reminder, on Friday we are doing a tour of our booster station that was just recently completed at the reservoir facility. That's at 10 a.m. Friday morning. So again, if you're interested, please reach out, follow up. We're trying to determine how many folks we're going to have there, but we have a couple council members that will be in attendance as well. And so I look forward to sharing that important project, and you guys can see it firsthand and talk with a team that was instrumental in getting that project completed. So a huge milestone for the city in terms of getting that project completed and operational. So years in the making, as Chair O'Connell and others know. So
Good.
with that,
I
that's it from
remember
the
that was
director.
just a glimmer in someone's eye, Brian. So thanks, Jason. Great work.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Any other business that should come before the board? If not, I will remind the board members that we are on recess next month for spring break, but we do have a meeting May 14. And any other business? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
I'll second it.
Moving second and to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate your time this evening. Again, sorry I was running late, and I'm sorry I held you beyond. Thanks very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye now.